The 2026 NBA Finals just ended, and the New York Knicks walk away celebrating their first championship in 53 years. But the Spurs walk away different. Both of these teams walk away with different futures that look insanely different than they did at the start of the season or even just a few months ago. One franchise finally climbed the mountain after decades of disappointment. The other franchise, the Spurs, they discovered that its championship window may have opened a lot sooner than anyone expected. Let's start with the champs. The Knicks, this championship changes everything. The Knicks spent half a century, 5 decades, living through failed rebuilds, bad contracts, superstar pursuits that went nowhere, and playoff heartbreak after playoff heartbreak. Entire generations of Knicks fans had never seen their team win a title, and now that's all over. The Knicks, they're not chasing history anymore. They made it. MSG, Madison Square Garden, is the mecca of basketball. And for the first time in 53 years, a championship banner will be hung. No player on this team benefits more than Jalen Brunson. Brunson signed with New York, and there were questions about whether he could truly be a franchise player. He was coming out of Dallas, and he was second option to Luka, and the Knicks paid him a ton of money, and people were thinking that it was a bad signing. But now these questions about can he be a franchise player feel ridiculous. Brunson turned the Knicks into a contender, but ultimately he became the face of the team, and he ended a 53-year drought. And that's an accomplishment that changes legacies forever. The debate about the greatest Knick of all time is going to be much louder after this title. You got players like Patrick Ewing, Walt Frazier, Willis Reed. They all have legendary status in New York. But Brunson is different. He just brought a championship, second ever championship, to the city. He's the unquestioned leader of the franchise, and whether he's the greatest Knick as of right now is up for debate. I've seen many people call him that online already, though. He's unquestionably in the conversation now, especially with that performance in the fourth quarter of Game 5 to shut out the series. He was playing out of his mind. The championship, it also validates the Knicks front office. For many years, New York was mocked for instability, poor decision-making, and instead of panicking and chasing quick fixes, they built a tough physical roster that fit together. This result wasn't just, a deep playoff run or a finals appearance. It was a championship, top of the mountain. Every move suddenly looks smarter when you're holding the Larry O'Brien trophy. And that's just what the Knicks did. The Knicks also proved that they belong among the NBA's elite moving forward. I've seen, many jokes in the past about how, the Knicks not being a competent team. There was that one Disney movie, Soul, where they made the joke about, I've been messing with this team for years. But that's different now. That changes. This wasn't just a magical Cinderella run. This was a legit contender that survived multiple playoff rounds and finished the job on the biggest stage. They went 16-3 in the playoffs. That's insane. Winning a championship, however, doesn't just mean automatically that everything is perfect. The pressure on the Knicks changes immediately. People are satisfied with the championship, but not completely. They are satisfied, with more, right? You're not just going to satisfy people now with a deep playoff run or making the playoffs like some other franchises would be. But every season from this point on, it's going to be measured against this championship standard, and that's the price for success. The target now is on their backs too. Every team in the East will spend the offseason. They're going to just be looking for ways to knock these guys off their pedestal. I've seen a lot of analysts talking about how the Knicks, they're going to win this one, but they won't get another one after this. A lot of people have been talking about how the East was weaker this year. But no championship in history, doesn't have an asterisk on it. And with the parity we've seen in the last 8 or 9 years of champions, winning a singular championship in this era is not a knock on a team. It's just not. But that's enough about the Knicks. Let's move on to the Spurs. Despite losing this finals, San Antonio should feel incredibly optimistic about where they stand. And I know that's hard to picture maybe because like, it's a long off season, especially after losing the finals that way. But before the season began, nobody expected the Spurs to be in this position. A lot of people just viewed them as a talented young team that was still a year or two away from seriously competing for anything. And in fact, people were projecting them to just be like a play-in team that at most bounced in the first, second round. But instead, they reached the finals, and they genuinely pushed the Knicks. Winning in 5 may not sound like sound like they pushed them, but the series was much closer than that shows. The most encouraging thing for San Antonio, is that they weren't overmatched in the series. They held double-digit leads in every single game, every single first quarter, I think, actually. So just think about that for a second. There's not this is a young team that's just out there getting blown off the floor by some veteran champion, getting cooked by Brunson every time they're on the court. But they were consistently in a position to win a basketball game. They proved they had the talent to compete with the best team in basketball. And the problem wasn't getting a lead. The problem was just keeping it. That's a much easier problem to solve than getting a lead. Wemby's performance throughout the finals, it should have Spurs fans excited. Not even just throughout the finals, throughout the entirety of the playoffs, especially in that Thunder series. He looked every bit like the future face of the NBA people are projecting him to be. There were stretches where he completely controlled games on both ends of the floor. His defensive impact was absurd. And his offensive game is going to continue to evolve. And it's honestly scary to think about what kind of player Victor Wembanyama will turn into over these next few years. If anybody has any doubts about if Wemby can carry a championship caliber team, he just squashed those doubts in year 3. The next biggest positive, maybe honestly could be the biggest positive, is Dylan Harper, man. The pressure of the playoffs, much less the NBA Finals, overwhelms young players most of the time. But Harper never seemed intimidated by the moment. Throughout the finals, he looked like the only Spurs player comfortable on offense. He attacked confidently, creating for himself, and repeatedly looked like somebody who belonged on the biggest stage. He looked like, instead of a rookie, a maybe 8-year veteran. For a franchise trying to build a long-term contender, having Harper emerge like this alongside Wemby may be the biggest victory of the entire postseason. The Spurs now appear to have multiple cornerstone pieces instead of just one, and that's how dynasty starts, man. I'm serious. This Spurs team, maybe even next year, it's going to be terrifying. But there's a lot of positives for the Spurs team, of course, but we also saw some serious weaknesses exposed throughout this entire finals run. I think a big criticism should be directed towards Mitch Johnson. I think, you got to give him his flowers. He guided a young team to the finals. However, his late game coaching throughout the series was just, it's hard to excuse, man. Time and time again, New York went on huge momentum shifting runs while San Antonio struggled to respond. It was incredibly apparent game 4 when the Spurs were up 29 and the Knicks go on a little bit of a run, and instead of slowing the pace down trying to get an easy bucket, the Spurs are just jacking threes, and Mitch Johnson's not changing anything about it. And it ultimately led to the biggest blown lead in finals history in a singular game. And you just have to, rotations at this point, they become questionable. Adjustments are coming way too slow, if they're even coming at all. And the team repeatedly looked unprepared for critical moments late in games. Coaches are judged by what happens in the biggest moments, and Johnson just simply didn't coach well in the finals. The youth of the Spurs team, while being something that Spurs fans can be happy about, also showed itself at the worst possible times. Young teams always have to learn these painful lessons before they become champions, and San Antonio looked incredibly composed when they were building these huge leads, but when things tightened up in games, it changed. Turnovers would increase, defensive communication broke down, possessions becoming more and more rushed, shots becoming worse and worse. The inexperience that wasn't obvious earlier in the playoffs became impossible to ignore in the finals. It's frustrating, of course, but it's not abnormal. It's actually extremely normal. Most championship teams have suffered through similar experiences before they eventually break through. I mean, even the Knicks struggled in the playoffs the year before when they faced the Pacers. And then, a year later, breakthrough. I think the biggest disappointment for the Spurs team, it has to be De'Aaron Fox. The Spurs, they brought in Fox. They wanted this experienced star who could settle the offense and, run it, take pressure off Wemby during difficult stretches. Instead, dude was out of rhythm. I mean, his numbers were terrible. Scoring efficiency disappeared. Decision-making inconsistent. And there were too many moments where San Antonio needed a veteran to step up, and he simply just wasn't that. For a player of Fox's caliber, expectations are just naturally higher. I mean, I've seen a lot of people say it, and honestly, I have to agree. Dylan Harper looked more like a veteran than De'Aaron Fox did throughout most of the series. Heck, most of the playoffs. If the Spurs want to make it back to the finals, and finish the job next time they're here, they're going to need significantly more from him if he's even on the team at that point. Because I think that with this guard rotation, Dylan Harper, Steph Castle, I don't know how much longer, De'Aaron Fox has a place in San Antonio. That's something that the Spurs front office is really going to be eyeing, as we go through this offseason, the next few off seasons. Like, if we have these great guards and a great guard rotation, how necessary is De'Aaron Fox if he's going to crumble in the biggest moments? In the end, the finals is going to be remembered as a defining moment, for both these franchises. For the Knicks, it's going to be the year that they ended a 53-year, championship drought. A championship banner will hang in Madison Square Garden, and Jalen Brunson's name is going to be remembered alongside the greatest players in franchise history forever, if not the greatest player in franchise history forever. For the Spurs, I mean, it's just a reminder that talent alone just isn't enough to win a championship. It shows that their future is incredibly bright and that they're way ahead of schedule, but the team proved, that while we can compete with the best in the league, we're just not there yet. The Knicks ultimately got the trophy. The Spurs ended with the lesson. And if history can tell us anything, those lessons have a way of turning talented young teams, into future champions. And I think that's what we see down the road from the Spurs. I don't know about the Knicks, however. I think that they will continue to compete in contend in years upcoming. But for now, that's not the main focus. For now, it's just the job's finished. Let's celebrate, So if you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like, subscribing to the channel. I want to be able to upload more consistently and, more basketball videos in the future. So, if you want to see that, make sure you sub, like, comment. Let me know what you think about this finals in the comments below. And see you next time.